Far from the busy cities and bright highways of Louisiana, where rivers split and twist like veins through the land. There are villages that time itself seems to have forgotten. At night, the water stops moving. The air grows thick and heavy. And the silence becomes so loud that it feels alive. Fishermen speak of lantern lights drifting across the water with no boats beneath them. Travelers tell stories of villages that appear at sunset and vanish by dawn. Locals warn that some river delta villages are not abandoned. They are waiting. Waiting for footsteps on wooden docks. Waiting for voices to echo through empty streets. Waiting for someone foolish enough to listen to the whispers rising from the water. Tonight, we travel deep into the Louisiana River Delta. Into villages where the rivers remember every death. And the dead have never truly left. Hello, my dear friend. I am truly glad you are here tonight. Because what we are about to explore is not just a story. It is a journey into places where the boundary between the living and the dead has grown dangerously thin. Louisiana's river delta is a place of beauty. The dead have never truly left. But it is also a place of decay. Here, water slowly swallows land. Houses sink inch by inch. Graveyards flood. And memories refuse to fade. In these villages, people have reported hearing footsteps on docks that collapsed decades ago. They have seen shadows standing knee-deep in water, staring silently from beneath cypress trees. Some hear children laughing across the marsh, even though no children live there anymore. Others hear their names whispered softly from the river itself. Before we begin, let me ask you something. A question that will change everything. If you were drifting down a dark Louisiana river at night, and you saw a village appear ahead that was not on any map, would you stop to explore it, or would you turn back while you still could? Now, take a slow breath. And let us step carefully into the most haunted river delta villages in Louisiana. A single road, cracked and weathered, winds its way through the dense pine forest. It leads to a place where the trees part, and the sky opens up to reveal a stretch of slow, dark water. This is Blackwater Bend. It sits at a confluence, where two rivers surrender their individual currents to become one. The water here does not rush. It swirls, deep and silent, carrying leaves and history in a patient, endless circle. By daylight, Blackwater Bend appears empty. A ghost town claimed by the river. Rooflines of houses break the surface of the water. Their walls stained with high water marks and thick with moss. Windows are dark cavities. Porches descend into the murk, becoming docks for no one. The only sounds are the distant cry of a heron and the lap of water against weathered wood. It is a picture of quiet abandonment. But as the sun dips below the tree line, a change occurs. A soft, orange glow begins to emanate from within those flooded houses. Not the harsh glare of electricity, but the warm, flickering light of lanterns. One by one, they appear, casting long, trembling reflections on the black water. The village, so silent by day, seems to breathe with light by night. For the few boaters who have navigated these remote waters after dusk, the experience is always the same. A knock. A distinct, hollow knock on the hull of the boat, as if someone is in the water below, tapping to get in. Then come the voices. They are not shouts, but pleas. Muffled, desperate, and chillingly clear. They call for help, for shelter, for a way out of the cold dark. The voices seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, carried on the damp air. Every instinct tells you to look, to help. But those who have leaned over the gunwale, flashlight in hand, find nothing. The voices fall silent. You are left alone with the sound of your own heartbeat and the profound, unsettling quiet of the bend. Local legends offer explanations, passed down through generations. The most common story speaks of a historic flood, a century ago. They say the rains came for 40 days and 40 nights, a biblical deluge that swelled the two rivers until they became a single inland sea. The villagers, trusting the levees that had always protected them, stayed until it was too late. The water rose with a terrifying speed, swallowing homes, streets, and lives in a single, tragic night. Blackwater Bend did not evacuate. It drowned. Yet, there is another, older story. One whispered not about a village that died, but about a village that adapted. This tale suggests that when the Great Flood came, the people of Blackwater Bend made a choice. They could not fight the water, so they learned to live within it. They modified their homes, created air pockets, and found ways to survive beneath the surface. The lantern lights are not ghosts, but the simple, daily reality of a submerged community. The knocks on the hull are attempts at communication. The pleas are not from the dead, but from the isolated, forever cut off from the world above. Scientists and historians dismiss both tales. Official records show the village was peacefully relocated before a major dam project altered the rivers. The lights, they say, are methane gas from decaying vegetation. The sounds are old wood groaning, or the clever mimicry of water birds. There are logical, comfortable explanations. Standing on a shore overlooking Blackwater Bend as twilight deepens, you feel the weight of the place. You listen to the water, and in its swirls and whispers, you hear echoes. Perhaps the truth of Blackwater Bend is not in choosing one story over the other. Perhaps the truth is in the confluence itself, just like the two rivers, where past and present merge, where tragedy and resilience swirl together in the same current. It is a monument to a disaster, and a testament to the enduring human will to persist, even in the most impossible of circumstances. The road out of the forest feels longer than the road in. The image of those gentle lantern lights stays with you. A question lingers, as deep and dark as the water in the bend. Did the village drown that night? Or did it simply learn to breathe a different way? Some say it perished. Others say it still lives, just beneath the surface. And the slow, swirling current keeps it secret, moving in a patient, endless circle. The forest begins as a whisper of green, a gentle line on the horizon. But as the old road winds deeper, the light changes. The sun seems to struggle here, its beams fractured by a dense canopy of ancient cypress trees. Their massive, gnarled trunks rise from the damp earth like silent sentinels, their roots like petrified serpents breaking through the soil. This is the approach to Cypress Hollow, a place hidden behind a wall of living history. The air here undergoes a distinct shift. The warmth of the outside world simply fails to penetrate. A permanent chill hangs in the atmosphere, not the crisp chill of winter, but a damp, clinging cold that seems to seep from the very ground. It settles on the skin and prompts an involuntary shiver. A primal reaction to an environment that feels fundamentally separate from the world you left behind. According to the fragmented records that remain, the houses, what is left of them, are simple wooden structures, now sagging under the weight of decades of neglect and moss. Their windows are dark, vacant eyes. Their doors, where they still hang, creak on rusted hinges. But the true mystery of this place is not in its decay. It is in the manner of its abandonment. One evening, in the autumn of 1927, every single resident of Cypress Hollow vanished. The event was absolute and utterly silent. Neighbors did not call out to one another. There were no cries of alarm. The town simply went quiet. When a supply wagon arrived the following week, the driver found a scene of eerie preservation. Meals sat on tables, half-eaten, the food long since petrified. Cups of coffee were stained onto saucers. Doors to homes were swung wide open, as if the occupants had just stepped out for a moment. But they never returned. No personal items were taken. No notes were left. It was as if the entire population had been lifted from the fabric of their lives in a single seamless motion. In the years since, Cypress Hollow has not found peace. Visitors who brave the overgrown path and the chilling air report phenomena that defy easy explanation. It is a place of persistent sound in a visual void. The most common report is the clear, unmistakable sound of wooden chair legs scraping across wooden floorboards. It is a slow, deliberate drag, coming from inside the hollow shells of houses. Yet, peer through those empty window frames, and the floors are bare, covered only in dust and decay. The shadows here behave with a curious intention. As the weak light filters through the cypress boughs, long, deep shadows stretch across the clearing. Observers often note a dissonance, a lag between the movement of the branches and the movement of the shapes on the ground. Some shadows appear to detach themselves, sliding along the walls of the abandoned homes, pausing behind windows as if looking out, before merging back into the gloom. They are silhouettes of activity, a memory of motion burned into the atmosphere. But the most arresting account, the one that chills the bone more deeply than the air, concerns the figure by the water. Its details are blurred, as if viewed through a pane of frosted glass. It does not move. It does not gesture. It simply faces the dark water, a statue of shadow and suggestion. And yet, those who see it feel an overwhelming, certain knowledge. It is aware. It is watching. Not the pond, but you. Scientists and skeptics have visited, of course. They point to infrasound, to natural gas leaks that can induce collective hysteria, to the power of suggestion in a lonely, oppressive environment. They speak of swamp gases forming willow, the wisp lights and strange echoes bouncing between the dense trees. These are logical, reasonable explanations for individual phenomena. But taken together, the chilling air, the shared historical trauma of the disappearance, the consistent auditory hallucinations, the anomalous shadows, and the recurring figure by the pond create a tapestry of experience that logic struggles to unravel. Cypress Hollow does not present a traditional ghost story. There are no screaming apparitions, no violent events replaying. Instead, it offers a profound and unsettling emptiness, a void that somehow feels active and observant. The sounds are not of chaos, but of mundane, domestic life forever interrupted. The shadows move with a dreadful, slow purpose. The figure by the water is the embodiment of a patient, eternal vigil. The hollow seems to hold the final moment of a community in a state of perpetual suspension. The air is cold because the warmth of life departed all at once, and never returned. The sounds are echoes of that last, ordinary evening, trapped in a loop. The shadows are the after-images of people caught between one second and the next. And the figure by the water? Perhaps it is a sentinel, guarding whatever secret lies beneath the murky surface. Or perhaps it is a remnant, waiting for a return that will never come, forever watching the approach through the wall of ancient trees. To walk out of Cypress Hollow is to feel the gradual return of warmth to your skin, and the slow easing of a tension you did not fully acknowledge until it began to fade. You look back only once. The trees stand impassive, guarding their secret. The air is still and cold. And you cannot shake the feeling that from within that deep green gloom, something is still watching you leave. The landscape here holds its breath. It is a place of silent water and whispering reeds, where the sky meets the marsh in a seamless, damp gray. This is Dead Man's Fork. A name that does not invite, but warns. It is not a dramatic canyon or a raging rapid. Its terror is quieter, slower, born from the unnatural split in the river ahead. Where the calm watercourse should continue its single-minded journey to the sea, it instead divides. Not with the gentle grace of a natural delta, but with a sharp, almost surgical divergence. The land between the forks is a sunken finger of bog and skeletal trees. The water here moves with a viscous reluctance, as if burdened by a memory it cannot forget. That memory is etched in local lore, a tragedy whispered over generations. Decades ago, a night ferry, overloaded and moving against the current's advice, met its fate at the fork. The conflicting currents, the sudden split in the channel, created a vortex of confusion. The vessel was pulled under. Many souls were lost to the chill, grasping waters. In the days that followed, bodies were recovered from these same banks, the river reluctantly giving up its dead. The official records call it an accident. The place itself, however, seems to tell a different, darker story. For those who live nearby, the incident was not an ending, but a beginning. A beginning of the haunting. They speak of the sounds first. When the sun sinks and the mist begins to coil like smoke from the water's surface, the marsh falls into an unnatural silence. The frogs cease their chorus. The birds still their wings. It is in this void that the echoes begin. Not words, but screams. Distant, choked, and full of a panic that time has not diminished. They seem to come from everywhere and nowhere, rolling across the flat water, a soundscape of perpetual drowning. Then, there are the figures. Witnesses, reliable people with no taste for fantasy, speak of seeing them on fog-heavy nights. Shapes that resolve from the river mist itself. They appear as dark, humanoid forms, rising waist-deep from the confluence of the forks. They do not walk, but drift, moving with a painful slowness toward the shore. Their movements suggest an immense effort, a struggle against an unseen force. And always, without fail, they vanish. As if erased. The waters are black and still, reflecting the dark sky above. The air is heavy with an otherworldly presence, as if something is watching from just out of sight. The silence is oppressive, punctuated only by the sound of distant, mournful whispers. The whispers coalesce into a single, chilling phrase, "It's coming, it's coming, it's coming." This repetitive, futile procession has led to the most unsettling belief of all. A belief that the water of Dead Man's Fork is not merely a location, but an active entity. That the tragedy imprinted something into the very substance of the river. That the water itself refuses to let the dead rest. It clutches the souls of those lost, replaying their final moments, refusing them the peace of the far shore. It is a prison without walls, a sentence served in the cold embrace of the current. The figures are not ghosts seeking to haunt the living, they are captives trying, and forever failing, to escape their liquid cell. Scientific minds offer other explanations. They point to the peculiar gas releases from the decaying marsh floor, which can cause auditory hallucinations. They describe the strange behavior of thick fog under specific temperature gradients, how it can create towering, human-like shapes that dissipate with the slightest breeze. They cite the power of suggestion, the weight of a tragic tale upon an impressionable mind in a lonely place. Yet, for all the rational explanations, a visitor standing at the bank at twilight feels the wrongness in their bones. The air is too still. The water's split seems too precise, too angular against the softness of nature. The silence feels deliberate, a held breath before a recurring performance. You find yourself not just looking at the water, but watching it. Waiting. The divide of the fork no longer seems a geographical feature, but a wound. And some wounds, soaked in sorrow, never truly close. Dead Man's Fork remains, a quiet scar on the landscape. It is a place where history is not a record in a book, but a lingering presence in the damp air. Where the boundary between past and present feels as thin as the mist. Where the river does not just flow, but remembers. And in its relentless, whispering memory, the dead are never quite allowed to leave. Willow Sink rests at the far edge of a wide delta where the river slows and forgets its own strength. From a distance the village appears calm, almost suspended in time. Only when you draw closer does the truth reveal itself. The land here has been giving way for generations. The river changed its course inch by inch, carrying away silt that once held the ground firm. Beneath the surface, layers of soft earth shifted and loosened. Foundations that had stood straight for decades began to lean. Floors dipped. Doors no longer closed as they once did. People stayed because the change was slow enough to deny. Each year the ground lowered a little more, and each year the village adjusted. Children learned to walk on tilted paths without thinking. Life continued, balanced on a gentle but relentless descent. The houses of Willow Sink now lean at angles that seem impossible. Rooflines cut against the sky in uneven lines. Walls bend as if softened by heat. Some homes are supported by long stilts driven deep into mud. While others rest half submerged, their lower rooms abandoned to damp shadows. When the wind moves through broken doorways, it carries the scent of river water and old wood. Visitors describe an uneasy sensation beneath their feet. The ground feels alive, not in a violent way, but in a slow and patient motion. Boards creak without cause. Footsteps send faint ripples through puddles that should be still. It is not fear that rises first, but confusion. The body senses movement before the mind can explain it. Long ago, engineers warned that the delta was unstable. They spoke of sediment loss and rising water levels, of a future where the land would no longer hold. Their reports were filed away, overshadowed by daily needs and quiet optimism. The river had always provided. It was hard to believe it could also take. As the years passed, families began to leave. They packed what could be carried and sold what could not. Empty houses remained, their windows clouded and their gardens reclaimed by reeds. Yet some residents refused to go. They spoke of roots deeper than soil, of memories tied to every bend in the river. Leaving felt like surrender. Night in Willow Sink carries a different weight. As daylight fades, the village grows unnaturally still. The river reflects the moon in broken fragments, distorted by the uneven banks. The willows whisper as their branches brush against one another, producing a soft and constant murmur. It is during these hours that people notice the sound. It begins faintly, almost mistaken for wind. A pattern emerges, a rhythm that does not match the breeze. The whispers seem to shape the same sequence of words again and again, though no voice can be clearly identified. Some claim it is the river speaking through the trees. Others believe it is an echo of those who once lived here, repeating a warning too late to change anything. No one agrees on what the words mean. Attempts to record the sound result in little more than static and rustling leaves. Yet those who hear it in person describe a strange certainty, as if the message is understood without being translated. The feeling lingers long after the sound fades, pressing gently but persistently on the mind. During the day, Willow Sink appears almost ordinary. Sunlight warms the warped wood and reflects off shallow pools where streets once ran dry. Birds nest in the eaves of abandoned homes. Fish swim where gardens once bloomed. Nature adapts quickly, filling spaces left behind by human retreat. Researchers still visit, documenting the slow collapse of the settlement. The feeling lingers long after the sound fades. Pressing gently but persistently on the mind. A strange certainty, as if the message is understood without being translated. They measure angles, map fractures, and monitor the shifting ground. Map fractures and monitor the shifting ground. A place caught between states, suspended in a gradual fall. What makes Willow Sink endure in memory is not just its physical decline, but the way it feels to stand there. The silence is heavy but not empty. Every creak and splash seems purposeful. The village does not feel abandoned so much as waiting, aware of its own fate. In the end, Willow Sink teaches a quiet lesson. Change does not always arrive with force. Sometimes it comes as a slow surrender. A patient rearranging of the world beneath our feet. And as long as the willows stand and the river flows, the whispers will carry on through the night, marking time in a place that refuses to disappear all at once. Along a forgotten curve of a wide, slow-moving river, there is a place where the mist hangs low until noon. A century ago, it was a thriving fishing settlement, a noisy, bustling ribbon of life along the wooden docks. The air smelled of tar, nets, and frying fish. The water was dotted with boats from dawn until dusk. Now, no boats remain. The piers stretch out into the murky water like skeletal fingers, their planks gray and weathered. The shacks that once housed gear and families are slumped and silent, paint long since peeled away by wind and time. By day, it is a portrait of abandonment. A place where time has clearly stood still. But as the last light of sunset bleeds from the sky, a different truth reveals itself. One by one, lanterns bloom into light along the deserted docks. They are not electric. They are old-fashioned oil lanterns. Their glass panes sooty, casting warm, trembling circles of gold onto the dark water. And the worn wood. Every night, without fail, Lantern Row illuminates itself. Visitors who have braved the overgrown path to witness this phenomenon speak of the sounds. First, it is the footsteps. A steady, rhythmic tread on the old piers. The sound of many boots moving with purpose. The footsteps walk from the shore to the ends of the docks and back again, as if checking lines or hauling in a catch. Then comes the creaking. It is the distinct, mournful groan of ropes under strain, the sound of rigging moving against wooden masts. But looking out, the water remains empty. There are no masts, no hulls, nothing to which those ropes could be tethered. Finally, there are the voices. They do not speak. They sing. It is a low, harmonious hum at first, growing into the words of old river songs, shanties passed down through generations of those who worked these waters. The songs tell of hard labor, of homecomings, of storms weathered and calm seas enjoyed. The melody is carried on the night air, clear and resonant, seeming to come from the very center of the dock, from the empty spaces between the lanterns. If you call out, the singing stops. The footsteps cease. The ropes fall silent. Only the lanterns continue to burn, their light reflecting in the still, black river. As if waiting for you to leave so the night's work can resume. Historical records on Lantern Row are sparse. The settlement was never officially incorporated. It simply existed, and then, it simply did not. There is no record of a great disaster, no plague, no fire. The common belief is that the fish simply left. The river changed its course slightly, or the great spawning runs ended. One season, the nets came up empty. The next, they came up empty again. Without the fish, there was no life. The families packed what they could and moved on, seeking a living elsewhere. The boats were sold or taken with them. Lantern Row was left to the elements. But that practical explanation does not account for the lights. Or the sounds. Some paranormal researchers suggest a phenomenon known as a residual haunt, a moment of intense daily life imprinted on the very fabric of the location, replaying itself like a recording. The lighting of the evening lanterns, the final chores of the day, the songs sung after a long haul. A ghostly routine, forever on loop. River folk who know the old stories tell a different tale. They say the spirit of a place is tied to its purpose. Lantern Row was born for fishing. Its heart beats to the rhythm of the nets and the tides. The village now fishes for memory. The lanterns are not to see by, but to be seen. A beacon to show that the work, in some form, continues. The footsteps are the echo of duty. The songs are the preservation of a culture standing on the shore at midnight, watching those golden lights flicker against the profound darkness. You are faced with a choice. You can see a ghost town, a collection of auditory and visual tricks born of suggestion and wind. Or you can see a vigil. The lanterns are lit so the row is never truly dark. The footsteps walk so the piers never feel abandoned. The songs are sung so they are not lost to silence. Perhaps both truths exist together, like the river and its mist. The physical world records an end. The unseen world suggests a continuation. As you turn to leave, the singing begins again, softly this time, a gentle hum that follows you up the path. It does not feel like a threat. It feels like a farewell, or perhaps, an invitation to return. Lantern Row has no boats. But it is still, in every way that matters, a working dock. There is a bend in the river that the maps do not accurately show. The water should be clear here, reflecting the sky and the overhanging boughs of willow and oak. But it is not. At Bloodroot Crossing, the river runs dark even under the full glare of the midday sun. It is a deep, tea-stained hue, the color of old rust or dried earth, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. This darkness gives the water a substantial, almost viscous quality, as if it is not merely water, but a liquid history flowing silently between its banks. The name itself, Bloodroot Crossing, is a relic of a forgotten past. Local archives, those that have not been lost to flood or fire, contain only fragmented references. They speak of a small, insular community that settled this bend in the river generations ago. They were not like the farmers and traders in the towns downstream. Their customs were their own. The legends, passed in hushed tones, suggest that the group practiced rituals on these muddy banks. The nature of these ceremonies is not recorded, but their purpose, according to lore, was one of offering and appeasement. It is said they believed the river was not just water, but a vein of the earth itself, and it required a toll to remain benign. To stand at Bloodroot Crossing today is to feel the weight of that history in a deeply personal way. The sensation is immediate and unmistakable. The gaze does not seem to come from any single location, not from the trees or the far bank. It feels emergent, rising from the river itself, as if the dark water possesses a collective, watchful consciousness. Birdsong often ceases here, leaving only the low, gurgling murmur of the current, which sounds unsettlingly like a whispered conversation. Visual phenomena at the crossing are rare, but those who report them are consistent in their descriptions. On still days, when the surface is like dark glass, a traveler might see a bloom of deep, crimson red begin to spread beneath the water. It does not mix with the dark flow immediately. Instead, it curls and expands like ink dropped in a jar, forming intricate, cloud-like patterns before slowly dissolving. No source is ever visible. It simply manifests, a sudden stain against the darkness, as if something far below has been disturbed. Scientists have suggested it could be a rare mineral deposit, or a type of algae reacting to light. But those who witness it speak of a profound, instinctive dread that accompanies the sight. A feeling that the stain is not natural at all, but a remnant. The physical manifestations are far more disturbing, though never violent. Visitors recount a distinct sensation of pressure, of subtle, tactile interaction with the empty air. People describe the feeling of unseen fingers lightly plucking at a jacket sleeve, or a gentle, insistent tug on the hem of a coat. This pull is always directed toward the water's edge. It is never strong enough to overpower an adult, but it is persistent, a slow, coaxing. Attempts to document or explain bloodroot crossing have yielded little. Water samples show high concentrations of tannins from the surrounding peat and decomposing leaves, which explains the color, but not the presence of iron or other minerals that might account for the red stains. Electromagnetic readings are normal. Audio recordings capture only ambient sound. The phenomenon exists almost entirely in the subjective human experience. A collection of sensory impressions that align with terrifying consistency across decades of anecdotal reports. This leads to a compelling psychological theory. Some researchers propose that bloodroot crossing is a powerful example of a place acting as a psychic amplifier. The known history of strange rituals, combined with the inherently ominous dark water, primes the visitor for a frightening experience. The mind, expecting to feel watched, constructs that feeling. The eye, expecting to see a stain, might misinterpret a trick of light. The sense of touch, heightened by anxiety, could misattribute the brush of tall grass or the push of air current from the river. In this view, the crossing is a stage, and the legend itself is the director, guiding each visitor through a personal, anticipated horror. Yet, this theory stumbles when confronted with the sheer physicality described by those who felt the tug. The unambiguous pull on clothing, the distinct sensation of fingers, however faint, seems to cross a line from pure psychology into something else. Perhaps the rituals performed here did more than just stain the memory of the land. Perhaps they left an imprint, a pattern of energy or intent that still lingers, not with malice, but with a habitual, ritualistic need to complete an old, forgotten cycle. Bloodroot crossing remains a paradox. It is a place of undeniable atmospheric pressure, where history and landscape conspire to create an experience that feels both deeply personal and eerily universal. The river continues its dark, silent journey to the sea, carrying its secrets in its depths. Whether the phenomena are born from the human mind, projected onto a suggestive canvas, or whether the river itself holds a whisper of the past that can, at times, reach out and brush against the present, is a mystery that each visitor must untangle for themselves. One leaves the crossing with a single, indelible impression. The water is not just dark. It is watching. And it remembers. Nestled deep within a forgotten bend of the river, shrouded by perpetual damp and the quiet of the deep woods, lies Mossvale village. It is a settlement reclaimed, not by forest, but by a singular, suffocating blanket of emerald. Moss does not simply grow here, it consumes. It drapes from rooftops in heavy, velvety curtains. It climbs walls in a dense, living tapestry, softening every sharp corner, swallowing whole garden fences. Windows peer out like drowsy eyes from behind layers of it. In some places, the moss hangs so thick and so deep that entire houses seem to vanish behind it, their forms blurred into mere suggestions in the green gloom. The air in Mossvale is cool, still, and tastes of wet earth and decayed leaves. Sound is muffled, absorbed by the spongy landscape. For those few who venture here, the first sign of something amiss is often the doors. Then, with a slow, sighing creak of hinges, they swing inward. Not with violence, but with a deliberate, almost welcoming motion. They open to dark, empty interiors, offering an invitation that feels anything but hospitable. Crossing a threshold is a decision few make lightly. Inside, the atmosphere is dense and watchful. The floorboards, ancient and damp, protest underfoot. But they also protest when no foot is present. A slow, rhythmic groaning will begin in a distant room, a sound of immense, invisible weight shifting on the timbers. It moves through the house, plank by plank, as if something large and unseen is pacing from room to room, methodically exploring its own hollow home. Then there is the breathing. It is the detail that sends a chill deeper than the damp. In an empty parlor, a visitor will hear it. A slow, steady, resonant inhalation and exhalation. It is not the rasp of an animal, but the deep, tired breath of something dormant, something resting in the very fabric of the place. To stand and listen is to feel you are standing inside the lungs of the village, that you are an intruder in a living, slumbering body. Most visitors do not stay long. The oppressive stillness, the autonomous doors, the groaning and the breathing, it becomes too much. They retreat to the single, moss-slick path leading back to the river and their boats. They push off with relief, putting distance between themselves and the green veil. It is only later, safe on the far bank, that they notice the footprints. Muddy, wet prints trailing from the water's edge, matching their own stride for stride. They are the prints that followed them from the house, across the village path, and right to the very spot they embarked. Prints that were not there when they stepped into their boat. So what is Moss Vale? Researchers point to unique, heavy spores in the air. That may cause mild auditory and visual hallucinations. They speak of the settling of waterlogged structures, creating the illusion of footsteps and groaning wood. The self-opening doors could be explained by subtle shifts in air pressure within the sealed homes. A natural phenomenon amplified by the terrain. But local tales, passed down in hushed tones, offer a different history. They say the villagers did not leave. They simply stayed. They became so entwined with their homes, so much a part of the quiet rhythm of the place, that when their time came, they simply faded into the background. Their presence seeped into the damp timber, the stone foundations, the very moss that grew upon them. The village is not haunted by ghosts, but by a profound and lingering sense of belonging. The doors open because the presence inside forgets no one is home. The floors groan under the memory of familiar weight. The breathing is the slow, patient respiration of a place that is forever occupied. Moss Vale Village endures, a serene and eerie monument to permanence. A place is only empty if the life has left it. But what if the life has simply changed form, becoming one with the walls, the air, the all-encompassing green? To visit is to feel you are being observed not by eyes, but by the environment itself. The moss is not a covering, but a skin. The village is not a location, but a being. And as your boat pulls away, you cannot shake the feeling that it watches you go. Breathing slowly, dreaming its deep, green dreams. And quietly noting the path you took to leave. Hollow Reed Settlement lies deep within a marsh where land and water struggle for control. From above, the village appears as a loose ring of weathered structures surrounded by endless reeds. The air is always heavy here, thick with moisture and sound. The reeds are never still. Even on calm days, they sway and murmur as if stirred by unseen currents. Locals say the sound is not wind, but something older moving through the marsh. The noise is constant, layered, and uneven, like overlapping breaths. It follows visitors from the moment they arrive, settling into the background until it becomes impossible to ignore. Hollow Reed Settlement was built generations ago by families drawn to the fertile wetlands. Fishing was plentiful, and the marsh offered natural protection from outsiders. Homes were raised on stilts, designed to withstand floods and seasonal changes. For a long time, the settlement thrived quietly, isolated but stable. Over time, stories began to circulate. Travelers reported hearing voices carried by the reeds, not loud, but clear enough to suggest intention. The sounds did not resemble any known language. They flowed in shifting patterns, rising and falling, as if responding to movement. Attempts to trace the source always failed. The voices seemed to come from everywhere at once. Most residents learned to live with it. Children grew up hearing the whispers as part of daily life. They warned that attention invited confusion, and confusion led to restless nights. Few questioned this advice, as sleep disturbances were already common in the marsh. As night falls, the settlement changes. The marsh darkens into a flat mirror that reflects very little. Mist rises slowly, blurring the boundaries between water and sky. It is during these hours that the glowing shapes appear. They drift just above the surface, faint and shifting, like reflections without a source. Observers describe the lights as soft and pulsing, never holding a fixed form. They move with purpose, weaving between reeds and disappearing into narrow channels. Some believe they are natural gases igniting briefly, while others are less certain. The dreams begin subtly, with sensations of floating or gentle swaying. Breathing becomes difficult. The dreamer struggles upward, only to find no surface. People wake suddenly, gasping for air, hearts racing. The sensation of water lingers, cold and heavy in the chest. Even seasoned travelers report needing hours to calm themselves. Many leave before dawn, unwilling to face another night in the marsh. Researchers have attempted to study the phenomenon. Audio recordings capture layered sounds, but analysis reveals no recognizable structure. Light sensors register movement, yet no consistent pattern emerges. Sleep studies conducted nearby show elevated stress responses and disrupted breathing cycles. No single explanation accounts for everything. Some theories point to environmental factors. The marsh releases gases that can affect perception. Constant sound may influence the subconscious, shaping dreams and sensations. Shifting light could be the result of bioluminescent organisms disturbed by movement. Each explanation addresses part of the mystery, but none explain the whole. Residents of Hollow Reed Settlement remain divided. A few families have left, citing exhaustion and unease. Others stay, insisting the marsh simply tests those who do not belong. They speak of balance, of respecting rhythms older than the settlement itself. To them, the whispers are not a threat, but a reminder. Daily life continues cautiously. Fishing nets are checked at dawn. Walkways are repaired where rot sets in. Conversations are brief and purposeful. Doors close early. Lamps are kept low. The reeds begin their nightly chorus. The village listens without responding. There is a sense that Hollow Reed Settlement exists on borrowed time. Water levels rise gradually each year. Channels widen. Walkways sink lower. The marsh advances with quiet patience. What unsettles visitors most is not the lights or the voices, but the feeling of being observed. Sounds shift when footsteps pause. Lights fade when approached. Dreams grow more intense the longer one stays. Hollow Reed Settlement remains largely unchanged on maps, a small mark in a vast wetland. Yet those who have been there know it leaves an imprint. Long after departing, they recall the whispers, the glow on dark water, the sudden need to breathe deeply. The marsh does not chase those who leave. It simply waits, murmuring softly, as it always has. There is a bend in the river where the water runs deep and slow. And the trees crowd the banks as if trying to listen. This place is known as Gravewater Point. A small town once stood here. A community of clapboard houses and a single general store. Built in a time when land was cheap. And cemeteries were often the first neighbors. The town was constructed beside an old burial ground, a hillside cemetery that had served the region for generations. It was considered hallowed ground, a place of peace. For years, the living and the dead coexisted with a quiet understanding, separated by a low stone wall and a sense of propriety. Then came the great floods. A series of punishing storms, years ago, changed the river's character. The water rose higher than any record predicted, chewing away at the soft earth of the bank. It undermined the hillside, and the old burial ground began to slip. Earth and stone and history slid into the waiting river. Coffins of aged pine and tarnished lead were exposed from the mud, then carried away by the current. Some were not. Some were recovered downstream. Many were not. The town of Gravewater Point was eventually abandoned. The houses left to the elements. But the river never gave back what it took. It kept its grisly inventory. And in the decades since, the point has developed a reputation. That keeps all but the most curious away. But the most curious away. Those who have ventured to the flooded remains of the town speak of the water itself. It is unusually dark, a shade of brown so deep it appears black. And within that darkness, shapes can be seen drifting just beneath the surface. They are not fish. They are elongated, slow-moving shadows that seem to follow the contours of the submerged houses and streets. They move with a purpose that feels intelligent, a silent patrol of the deep. The houses that still stand, their lower floors forever underwater, are the source of the most chilling accounts. Divers and urban explorers report that from inside these waterlogged rooms, you can see hands. Pale, blurred shapes of hands press against the exterior of the windows, from the outside. They are not trying to break in. They seem to be feeling the glass, or perhaps looking in, as if curious about the empty spaces where life once was. The pressure is steady, silent, and vanishes the moment a light is shone directly upon it. But the most constant, inescapable feature of Gravewater Point is the smell. The river here carries a particular odor. It is not the fresh scent of rain or the organic smell of wet earth. It is the faint, cloying smell of damp rot, of wet wood and decay that never, ever fades. You can leave the point, but the scent seems to linger on your clothes and in your memory. Scientists have plausible explanations, of course. The shapes in the water could be debris, old logs, or mats of vegetation caught in the strange currents of the bend. The hands on the windows might be optical illusions, the play of light on silt and floating particulate matter. The smell is likely the result of decaying plant life and anaerobic bacteria thriving in the low-oxygen environment of the submerged soil. Yet, logic feels thin at Gravewater Point. The atmosphere is one of profound disturbance. It feels less like a haunting of people, and more like a haunting of place itself. The boundary between the cemetery and the town was erased by the water. The river did not just flood a village, it mingled two worlds that were never meant to meet. Some people from the old families whisper that the dead are not angry, but disoriented. Their rest was violated not by malice, but by nature's indifference. The shapes in the water are lost, searching for familiar landmarks that are gone. The hands on the windows are not a threat, but an attempt to recognize a home that is now filled with river. The smell is the scent of that confusion, of a sacred silence forever broken. To stand on the shore at Gravewater Point is to witness a profound ecological and spiritual imbalance. The water is a grave, and the grave has overflowed. The point serves as a somber lesson in geography and memory. It asks what happens when the walls we build between the past and the present, between rest and activity, are washed away. The river flows on, carrying its dark water and its enduring scent. The shapes continue their slow drift. And the windows of the sunken houses, like cloudy eyes, stare out, feeling the gentle, persistent press from the other side. It is a place where the past is not buried, but suspended. Forever part of the current. The coastline here is a jagged scar of granite and shale, a dramatic meeting of stone and sea. Unlike every other cove for miles, its waters display a profound and unsettling stillness. The ocean, a creature of constant motion, lies down in this one place and becomes a perfect, silent sheet of glass. This stillness is not peaceful. It is an absence, a void where the expected sounds of the sea simply do not exist. The water is a mirror so clear and so flat it perfectly doubles the sky, creating a disorienting, boundless expanse. Most telling is what is missing from its surface. Not even insects skate across it. No water striders, no gnats, no floating debris. The air above the bay seems to hold its breath, and the bay itself refuses to acknowledge the wind. A leaf dropping from an overhanging branch will land and rest on the surface tension. As if on a solid table, not a single ripple radiating outward. The first sensory intrusion is subtle, a violation of that heavy silence. A whisper, spoken directly behind them, close enough to feel the imagined breath on the back of their neck. The content is maddeningly elusive, but the intent is clear. It is a communication meant for you, and you alone. The instinctive reaction is always the same. A swift turn, a search of the empty space. But no one is there. The tree line behind it still and quiet. There is no physical explanation, no hidden person, no clever trick of acoustics from a distant hiker. The whisper existed only in that specific point in space, directly behind the listener, and then it vanishes. This initial experience is often met with rationalization. It was the wind, though the air is still. It was imagination, fueled by the strange environment. But Whisper Bay is patient. The longer a person remains within its confines, the more assertive the phenomenon becomes. The whispers do not cease. They return, at irregular intervals, each time from that same intimate proximity. And with each recurrence, they grow incrementally louder. What began as a faint, almost subconscious sigh evolves into a clearer, more deliberate articulation. The syllables, while still not forming recognizable words, gain weight and texture. They carry emotion. Listeners report sensing urgency, curiosity, sadness, or a pleading insistence. The volume never rises to a shout, but it climbs to a normal speaking level, a confidential tone. In the middle of a silent, empty world. This escalation creates a profound psychological tension. The human mind is wired to seek the source of a voice. To have that source be perpetually just over your shoulder, yet forever unreachable, triggers a deep-seated anxiety. People begin to turn less often, dreading the confirmation of emptiness. They fix their gaze on the still water, as if it holds an answer, while the whispers continue their work behind them. The listener forced into the role of an unwilling participant. Scientific inquiries have yielded little. The bay's stillness is attributed to a unique underwater topography, a submerged shelf and a specific alignment of rock walls that perfectly cancel wave energy. It is a natural acoustic anomaly, a place where sound behaves unpredictably. Some researchers theorize that the whispers are the distant sounds of the ocean beyond the bay, of waves crashing on the outer cliffs, focused and distorted by the peculiar geology, channeled into a narrow beam that hits a specific spot on the beach. It is a natural acoustic anomaly, a place where sound behaves unpredictably. In this theory, you are standing in the focal point of a vast, natural whispering gallery. Yet, this fails to explain the adaptive nature of the whispers, their apparent response to the duration of a visit, or the consistent feeling of sentient communication. Why would a geological phenomenon seem to listen, and then speak louder when ignored? This has led to a more speculative, but compelling, line of thought. Perhaps the extreme stillness of Whisper Bay creates a kind of sensory deprivation. The mind, deprived of the expected auditory input of moving water, begins to generate sound to fill the void. The whispers are an auditory hallucination, a construct of the brain. Growing stronger the longer one is subjected to the unnerving quiet. The bay, in this view, is a blank canvas upon which the human psyche paints its own unease. But for those who have stood on its shore, both explanations feel incomplete. The experience is too external, too specifically located in space. There is a chilling sense that the silence itself is a presence. And the whispers are its method of examination. It is as if the bay is using the only language it understands. The language of absence and suggestion. To study the living things that intrude upon its stillness. The louder the whispers grow, the more one feels not like a visitor, but like a specimen being observed. By unseen observers just beyond the periphery of vision. Leaving Whisper Bay provides no instant relief. The sudden return of sound, the crash of waves on the normal coast, feels jarring and artificial. The memory of the whispers lingers, a psychic imprint on the mind. Many report hearing a faint, final sigh, not behind them, but deep within their own thoughts, as they pass the invisible boundary where the stillness ends. The bay remains, a perfect mirror of sky, holding its silence and its secrets. It does not invite return. It simply waits, a quiet audience for the next person who will stand on its shore and listen. While the voices gather softly behind them. On a wide, placid river, there exists a stretch of water that does not behave as it should. The current here slows to a crawl. The surface becomes a perfect, dark mirror, reflecting the sky with an almost solid stillness. This is not a natural lake. This is the grave of sunken Mercy Village. From the banks, you can see the evidence. Slate rooftops, like the backs of sleeping giants, break the surface at low tide. The peaked spire of a small stone church juts skyward, a lonely finger pointing at the clouds, its bell long silent to the world above. The rest of the homes, the lanes, the schoolhouse and the market square lies entombed below, preserved in the cold, tea-colored water. Decades ago, a deliberate decision was made. A new dam was constructed upstream, and the valley where Mercy stood was chosen for flood control. The residents were relocated, their homes purchased, their history documented. The waters rose gently, inexorably, swallowing the village whole. It was an act of progress, a sacrifice for the greater good. But some sacrifices are not as final as we intend. For those who live along the river now, the village is a quiet, unsettling neighbor. By day, it is a curious landmark for boaters. But by night, when the moon paints a silver path across the water, the sounds begin. They start as a low, resonant hum, a vibration felt in the bones more than heard by the ears. Then comes the clear, melodic tone of a single bell. It is not the chaotic clanging of something adrift. It is a slow, mournful toll, as if marking the hour for a congregation that no longer exists. The sound seems to rise from the deep, emanating from the direction of the submerged church spire. It carries across the water, a ghostly serenade that chills the air. This phenomenon has drawn the attention of the curious and the brave, primarily diverse equipped with lights and cameras. They descend into a world frozen in time. Street signs are still legible. Fences enclose yards now inhabited by fish. Chairs sit neatly behind sunken kitchen tables, as if waiting for a meal that will never come. The reports from these dives are consistent, up to a point. They describe the strange clarity of the water, and the way their lights create long, shifting shadows among the buildings. And then they describe the figures. They are seen at the edge of the Lida's reach, moving with a slow, purposeful gait. They appear to be walking along the submerged lanes, turning corners as if following a daily route. They are not floating, but proceeding as if the water was not there at all, their forms blurred by silt and distance. They do not react to the diversa lights or presence. They simply are, going about a routine that the flood could not erase. The encounters are brief, silent, and profoundly chilling. What is most telling, however, is what happens after the dive. Without exception, those who have reported these sightings refuse to return. They hang up their gear. They cite a feeling not of being in a ghost town, but of being an intruder in a functioning community that exists on a different plane. The water, they say, did not drown the village. It merely sealed it in, allowing its rhythm to continue in perpetual, liquid silence. To dive there is to briefly pierce that seal. To witness a memory so powerful it has taken physical form. It is an experience that once is enough, and forever too much. Scientists propose logical theories. The bells could be old cables, strumming in deep currents like underwater harps. The figures could be tricks of the light, unusual sediment shapes, or the mind seeking pattern in the murk. The reluctance to return is simply the primal fear of dark, confined spaces. Yet, the story of sunken mercy persists. It serves as a modern parable about what we leave behind. We can move people, exhume graves, and redirect rivers. But can we relocate a sense of place? Can we silence the echo of daily life? The village, in its watery vault, suggests we cannot. The dammed river did not bring mercy to the valley upstream. It instead created a monument to memory, a place where the past refuses to acknowledge its own demise. The church spire stands as a solemn sentinel. The bell tolls for no living ear. And far below, on streets no map records, the residents of mercy continue their evening strolls. Forever undisturbed, forever observed, and forever waiting in the cool, dark calm of their sunken world. Crooked or Hamlet once sat quietly along a narrow inlet where the lake bent inward like a hooked finger. The water there was usually calm, protected from strong winds by low stone bluffs and long stretches of pine. From a distance, the hamlet looked ordinary, with wooden docks, small boathouses, and simple homes facing the shore. Only the boats hinted that something was wrong. Every vessel left behind showed the same damage. Hulls were split. Planks were torn loose. Bows were crushed inward as if forced repeatedly against the docks. The destruction was not scattered by chance. Each boat rested where it had been tied, broken in place, ropes still knotted to posts worn smooth by years of use. No signs of a storm were ever found. Weather records showed calm nights and clear skies. The water level never rose enough to lift the boats and slam them down. As though the lake itself had grown impatient. The villagers disappeared shortly after the boats were discovered. There were no alarms raised, no messages sent to nearby towns. Homes were left with tables set and lamps unlit. Fishing nets lay drying on racks, half folded. Footprints led to the docks, then ended at the edge of the water. Search parties arrived within days. They found no bodies, no damaged shoreline, no signs of struggle. The lake bottom was shallow near the docks and dropped gradually farther out. Divers reported clear visibility. And found nothing that could explain the vanishings. The water was cold, but not unusually so. At night, Crooked or Hamlet changed. Locals from nearby villages began to report strange sights from across the lake. Oars drifted near the docks, moving in steady arcs. The water rippled in long lines, as if a rowboat passed through. But no boats followed the motion. Observers described the oars lifting and dipping with deliberate rhythm. Each blade entered the water at the same angle, then rose again, shedding droplets that caught faint light from the moon. The movement was careful, practiced, and silent. No hands were visible. No bodies disturbed the surface. The oars simply moved, guided by nothing that could be seen. Those who watched for long periods noticed something else. The rowing never carried the oars away from the hamlet. They circled the docks, turned gently, and returned to the same positions. The motion repeated without pause, as if following a route remembered rather than chosen. During daylight, the lake returned to stillness. The oars floated lifeless near the shore. Boats remained broken. The hamlet stood empty, its buildings creaking softly as they settled. Birds avoided the docks, choosing instead to perch in trees farther inland. Historians later uncovered fragments of the hamlet past. Crooked or Hamlet had been founded by fishermen who believed the lake demanded respect above all else. Old journals spoke of rituals performed before the first launch of the season. Oars were carved with symbols meant to ensure safe return. Boats were never left untied overnight. Over time, these practices faded. New generations dismissed them as tradition without purpose. Fishing schedules grew tighter. Boats stayed out later. The lake, once treated as a partner, became simply a resource. Some believe the smashed boats were a warning. Others think the vanishings were the result of a sudden decision to flee, though no one can explain where the villagers went or why they left everything behind. No paths leading away showed signs of travel. The only direction marked by evidence was toward the water. The only sounds captured were the faint lap of water and the soft knock of wood against wood, though witnesses standing nearby reported clear movement. One experiment involved anchoring an oar to a weighted line. At night, the line grew taut, pulling steadily until it snapped. The oar continued its motion, undisturbed, drifting back into its silent pattern. There is a feeling described by those who approach the docks after dark. It is the sense of being invited rather than threatened. The water remains smooth. The air is calm. The steady rhythm of rowing creates a false comfort, like a lullaby repeated too many times. People who stay too long report losing track of time. Minutes stretch. The urge to step closer to the edge grows strong, as if joining the motion would restore balance. Most leave before dawn, unsettled but unharmed. Crooked or Hamlet remains abandoned. The lake resumes its quiet performance, oars dipping and lifting without guidance. The rowing never reaches shore. It never moves outward into open water. It stays close, tracing the same unseen paths again and again. Whatever happened to the villagers, the lake does not reveal it. It only repeats the motion left behind, steady and patient, as if waiting for someone to take hold and finish the journey. There is a low place between the hills where the mist never fully lifts. This is Mud Grave. It is not a village of houses and streets, but a wide, sunken basin of deep, black mud and stagnant pools. The air here is thick and carries a heavy, unmistakable smell. It is the scent of wet earth, yes, but undercut by something older, a pervasive note of deep rot, like forgotten roots decaying in a forgotten place. The ground itself is restless. In patches across the broad expanse, the mud bubbles. Not with the violence of a geyser, but with slow, thick gurgles. Plops of dense earth rise and collapse, releasing small pockets of gas that carry the smell upwards. It gives the land a feeling of being alive, a slow and patient digestion happening just beneath the surface. Visitors to Mudgrave come for the strange phenomenon, but they are never prepared for the emotional toll. The first sensation is a profound and inexplicable sadness. It descends like a physical weight, a hollow feeling in the chest that has no logical source. This sadness soon deepens into a palpable dread, a certainty that something is deeply, irrevocably wrong. The silence of the place is not peaceful. It feels like a held breath. And then, they appear. Faces. They are not monstrous. They are human, etched in the slick, dark earth with a terrible softness. Their eyes are often closed, but sometimes they open. Their lips part, and they mouth silent words. People do not scream when they see them. The overwhelming emotion is not fear, but a crushing empathy. Witnesses report feeling the exact sorrow they see mirrored in the mud, as if the land is sharing a memory of pure loss. Some try to speak, to ask questions, but their voices are swallowed by the heavy air. Many visitors find themselves weeping uncontrollably, tears streaming down their faces for reasons they cannot articulate. They are crying for a tragedy they never knew, mourning for people they have never met. The compulsion to leave becomes urgent. They often depart in a quiet hurry, driven out by a sorrow that is not their own, carrying a chill that lingers long after they have left the basin. Historical records of Mudgrave are vague. The name appears on very old maps, but no deeds or census data exist for a settlement there. Local folklore, passed down in fragments, tells of a small, isolated community, a hamlet of farmers and peat cutters. The story speaks of a sudden calamity, a landslide or a sinkhole that swallowed the village whole in a single, terrible night. There was no time for rescue, no survivors to tell the tale. The earth simply took it back. Geologists have surveyed the basin. They confirm the area is a massive peat bog, a place where decaying organic matter has built up for millennia. A place where decaying organic matter has built up for millennia. The bubbling is methane and other gases, a natural byproduct of decomposition. The faces, they suggest, are a form of pareidolia, the human mind finding familiar patterns in random shapes, amplified by the stressful, eerie environment. The emotions could be a psychological reaction to the unsettling smells and the isolation. But those who have stood in Mudgrave know that explanation feels incomplete. The sorrow is too specific, too directed. It feels less like a random haunting and more like an emission. An echo of a final, collective moment of terror and heartbreak that was so powerful, it soaked into the very earth. The faces are not trying to frighten. They are trying to communicate. The silent words they mouth are perhaps a warning, or a last testament, or simply a repeated question of why. Mudgrave is not a place of active menace. It does not chase you. It simply makes you feel. It acts as a conduit for an emotion so strong it has become environmental. The bubbling ground is not threatening violence, but exhaling a memory. The smell is the scent of that memory. To walk out of that basin is to feel a gradual lightening, as if a great stone is being lifted from your soul. The normal sounds of the world return. Birdsong and wind, and the oppressive sadness recedes like a tide. Yet, a trace of it remains, a sobering aftertaste of a grief that is not yours. Mudgrave serves as a stark reminder that the ground beneath our feet is not always silent. It holds stories in its layers. Most places keep them buried. In this low place between the hills, the earth is still speaking. In bubbles and in shapes. And the only language it has left is one of overwhelming, silent sorrow. There is a stretch of the river known only to those who study maps with a certain curiosity. Or who listen carefully to the old, fragmented tales told in towns far downstream. By day, it is unremarkable. The water moves with a slow, brown languor, winding through flood plains choked with willow and tall, whispering reeds. The remains of a settlement are visible on the eastern bank. Little more than foundations being reclaimed by root and vine. This place is called Pale Current Town, a name that only reveals its truth after the sun has fully set, and the moon holds dominion over the sky. As true darkness falls, the change begins. It is not a sudden flash, but a gradual awakening. A faint, milky luminescence starts to rise from the riverbed. It is a cold, blue-white light, like the glow of certain fungi or the phosphorescence of stirred ocean plankton. But this glow is constant and sourceless. It emanates from the silt and stones of the river floor, illuminating the current from within. The river becomes a twisting ribbon of pale light cutting through the black landscape, a spectral road flowing silently toward an unknown sea. This is the Pale Current. And in this illuminated water, the figures stand. They are humanoid in shape, spaced at irregular intervals along the glowing stretch. They are humanoid in shape, spaced at irregular intervals along the glowing stretch. Their forms are silhouetted against the underwater radiance, dark outlines against the light. They do not react to the night sounds, to the call of an owl or the rustle of creatures in the brush. They are simply waiting, or listening. They do not react to the night sounds, to the call of an owl or the rustle of creatures in the brush. They are fixtures in the river, as still as stones. The compulsion to speak to them is a powerful, almost irresistible force for those who witness this scene. Defies logic and self-preservation. Perhaps it is a need to break the unbearable silence, or a desperate hope for a human response in this profoundly inhuman tableau. When a word is spoken, even a whispered exclamation, the reaction is slow, deliberate, and chilling. The nearest figure will begin to turn its head. The movement is not swift, but mechanically smooth, a rotation of the neck and shoulders toward the source of the sound. It is the motion of something acknowledging a stimulus. It is when the face comes into view that the true horror of Pale Current Town is revealed. The features are not mangled or decayed. They are absent. Where a face should be, there is only a smooth, blank expanse. The surface is not skin, but appears more like polished river stone or pale clay, reflecting the faint glow of the water. There are no indentations for eyes, no ridge of a nose, no line of a mouth. It is a void, a perfect, unsettling negation of identity and expression. This smooth face regards an emptiness more profound than any malevolent glare could ever be. The phenomenon raises questions that spiral into the realms of geology, history, and perception. Scientific investigation has focused on the glow. Water samples reveal an unusually high concentration of a specific bioluminescent microorganism, one that typically requires agitation to glow, yet here shines perpetually. Geologists point to mineral deposits in the shale bed, suggesting a rare, persistent piezo-luminescence, a light caused by constant pressure from the water's flow. These explanations account for the pale current, but they stand silent before the sentinel figures. Some researchers propose a psychological origin. The combination of the eerie light, the isolated location, and the known history of an abandoned town could trigger a powerful pareidolia. The human brain, seeking pattern, might transform submerged logs, unusual rock formations, or even thick clusters of aquatic plants into the suggestion of human forms. The act of speaking, of projecting Oni's own anxiety onto the scene, could complete the illusion, making the imagined figure seem to turn. The smooth faces, in this theory, are simply the dark, unreadable backs of heads, or a trick of shadow and glowing water, misinterpreted by a terrified mind. Yet, the consistency of the descriptions argues against mere hallucination. Witnesses from different backgrounds, at different times, report the same sequence with the same details. The slow turn. The smooth, featureless visage. The figures are always waist-deep. They are always facing the bank until addressed. This repetition suggests a phenomenon with rules, a ritualistic pattern of behavior. This leads to the most unsettling speculation. What if the figures are not intruders in the river, but the river itself? Perhaps the unique energy of the place, the perpetual light and the mineral composition, has absorbed a residual imprint of the town's former inhabitants. Not ghosts, but echoes made semi-solid, reflections caught in a loop, standing forever in the central artery of their lost community. The consequence of interaction is ambiguous. The figures turn, but they do not advance. They offer no threat, only that blank, silent observation. The witness is left with a crushing sense of insignificance, as if they have shouted into a canyon and received only the hollow, empty shape of a reply. The glow continues unabated. The current flows, light clinging to the water like a cold memory. To leave pale current town is to carry the image of that smooth face into the darkness of the ordinary world. The figures stand, as they perhaps always will. They are not waiting for rescue, or for recognition. They may simply be a permanent part of the landscape now, a silent population for a forgotten town, forever listening to the sound of their own luminous river flowing past. There is a place where the river spreads its fingers wide, fanning out into a labyrinth of slow channels and silent marshes. A fertile, green land, but one that holds a sorrow so deep it has seeped into the very soil. This is the Delta. A place that holds a sorrow so deep it has seeped into the very soil. This is Widow's Delta. The name is not poetic, but factual. It is a testament to a single, devastating day that changed everything. Generations ago, this was a thriving fishing community. The men took their sturdy boats out beyond the Rivera's mouth to the rich, deep-sea grounds. The women managed the homes, the gardens, and the bustling village on the shore. Then came the storm. It was a tempest of legendary fury, a wall of wind and water that rose from the horizon with unnatural speed. The entire fleet, every able-bodied man from the Delta, was caught in its path. Not a single vessel returned. In one afternoon, the village became a place of women and children. The heart of the community was pulled into the deep. In the years that followed, a collective vigil began. The women, now widows, refused to leave. To abandon the Delta would be to admit finality, to accept that their husbands were truly gone. Instead, they waited. They walked the muddy banks, their eyes scanning the distant line where the river met the sea. They waited for a return that logic said was impossible, but hope insisted was imminent. That sustained, collective expectation left a permanent mark on the landscape. Today, the Delta is sparsely populated. The old village stands, weathered but intact, a museum of paused lives. Visitors come to see the historic site, to sense the history. What they often encounter, however, is something more visceral. It begins with the sound. Not the frantic sobs of fresh grief, but the weary, heartbroken weeping of a sorrow that has lasted a century. It seems to come from the reeds, from the mist, from the water itself. Then there are the sightings. From a distance, boaters will see them. They resemble figures in faded linen, their forms blurred by mist and memory. They do not gesture or call out. They simply move with a slow, purposeless grace, as if patrolling a shoreline out of ancient habit, forever watching for sails that will never appear. The most commonly reported experience, however, is the feeling of being followed. A boater will navigate into the Delta, perhaps to fish its quiet backwaters or to photograph the haunting scenery. As they move deeper into the maze of waterways, a subtle unease takes hold. Glances over the shoulder reveal nothing but empty channel. Yet the conviction grows. A slow turn around a bend of river grass is met with the unsettling sight of their own wake, swirling and persistent, as if something large had just passed through the same water moments before. The journey out feels longer than the journey in. Engines cough for no reason. A sense of profound, patient observation hangs in the air. Many report feeling an overwhelming, sorrowful gaze upon them until they have cleared the final channel and returned to the open river, miles away. The crying could be the sound of wind through specific reed formations, or distant waterfowl. The white shapes could be early morning fog coiling into human-like forms. The feeling of being followed is a classic psychological response to isolation and known tragedy, a primal awareness of a place's heavy emotional residue. But in the Delta, the past feels less like history and more like a lingering condition. The widow's vigil did not end with their passing. It transformed. It became the environment itself. Their watchful hope, their endless waiting, did not dissipate. It imprinted on the fog and the water. The white shapes are not ghosts seeking rest, but sentinels maintaining a post. They follow modern boats not out of malice, but from a deep, ingrained instinct. To them, any vessel on the water could be the one. It could be the lost fleet, finally coming home. Wittawa's Delta remains a beautiful, sorrow-drenched land. The water holds the memory of that watchful gaze. The air carries the echo of that enduring lament. To travel its channels is to sail not just through space, but through a moment of time that has refused to end. To feel the weight of a hope that outlasted life itself. Still waiting, forever watching, from the lonely shore. Driftwood Reach lies along a stretch of coastline where the tide never seems to rest. Waves arrive gently, retreat briefly, then return again, carrying new fragments of wood each time. Logs, planks, roots, and splintered beams gather along the shore in growing mounds. No matter how much is cleared away, more appears by morning. The accumulation began decades ago. Storms far upriver sent broken structures downstream. And ocean currents delivered remnants from distant coasts. At first, the driftwood was useful. Locals built fires, repaired boats, and reinforced homes. Over time, the supply outpaced any need. Piles rose higher than a person, stretching for miles in either direction. During the day, Driftwood Reach appears quiet and ordinary. Sunlight bleaches the wood to pale gray and silver. The air smells of salt and old bark. The piles sit motionless, tangled but stable, shaped only by wind and tide. Visitors walk among them without concern, hearing only the surf and distant birds. Night changes everything. After dusk, subtle shifts begin. No single piece moves enough to be noticed at first. A log rolls slightly. A plank slides free. By the time darkness settles fully, the rearrangement is underway. Wood presses against wood, guided by slow and deliberate force. The sound is soft but constant, like careful hands at work. Those who have watched from a distance describe patterns emerging. Straight lines form where there were none. Curves appear, smooth and intentional. The piles no longer look random. They resemble constructions, shaped with purpose and awareness. Faces come first. They appear briefly, assembled from knots, cracks, and splintered grain. Eye shapes deepen as shadows align. Mouths stretch open where planks bend inward. The expressions vary, some calm, others strained, but all unmistakably human in form. They do not last long. As the tide shifts, the faces collapse back into disorder. Later in the night, larger shapes emerge. Frames take form, upright and balanced. Two vertical beams connect to a horizontal top, creating clear outlines of doorways. They stand alone among the piles, clear enough to recognize even in low light. Nothing supports them, yet they remain standing. Locals warn against approaching these structures. They say the shore is not meant to be navigated after dark. Footprints lead toward the frames, stopping just short or passing directly through. Those who stepped through the doorways did not disappear immediately. Some returned hours later, shaken and silent. Others were found wandering far from the coast, unable to explain how they arrived there. A few were never seen again. They described stepping forward and feeling no resistance, no change in temperature or sound. For a moment, nothing seems different. Then the world loses depth. Distances stretch unnaturally. Familiar landmarks vanish. Movement becomes difficult, as if walking through heavy water. The air feels thin. Breathing requires effort. Sounds arrive late or not at all. Turning back does not lead where expected. The doorway behind them appears smaller each time they look. Eventually, those who return stumble out near the shore, often far from where they entered. They collapse, exhausted, with no visible injuries. Researchers attempted to document the phenomenon. Time-lapse cameras captured rearranging driftwood, but footage degraded after sunset, frames blurring as if smeared by motion. Markers placed on specific logs were found miles away the next day, carried against known currents. One team attempted to dismantle a forming doorway before nightfall. They removed key beams and scattered the wood inland. By morning, a new frame stood in the same place, constructed from different pieces. There are theories, none complete. Some suggest tidal harmonics and magnetic influence cause coordinated movement. Others point to rare biological growths that bind and release fibers rhythmically. None explain the recognizable shapes, or the consistent reports from those who crossed through. Over time, Driftwood Reach was abandoned. Warning signs line the access roads. Fences keep visitors back from the densest piles. The shoreline continues its nightly work, undisturbed by human absence. At dusk, the wood begins to settle. By full dark, shapes rise again, precise and patient. Faces glance outward briefly before dissolving. Doorways stand waiting, empty but inviting, aligned toward the sea. The tide moves in and out, carrying more material. The piles grow larger, more complex. Whatever guides the rearrangement does not hurry. Driftwood Reach remains a place of thresholds. Not between land and water, but between understanding and uncertainty. The shore offers shapes that resemble passage, yet provide no safe destination. Those who observe from afar feel watched. Those who step closer feel drawn forward. By morning, everything returns to stillness. The wood lies scattered once more, innocent and inert. Only the footprints remain, leading toward places that no longer exist. On the edge of a great, silent lake, shrouded by ancient pines, there is a place called Hollow Bell Village. It is a scattering of old cabins and overgrown lanes, a settlement that seems to have been slowly absorbed back into the forest. The air is still, and the water is a perfect, dark mirror. By all appearances, it is a forgotten place, a quiet end of the road. But every night, without fail, a bell rings. It happens at the precise stroke of midnight. The sound is deep, clear, and resonant. The mystery is this. Hollow Bell Village has no church. It has no bell tower. There is no structure tall enough or strong enough to hold such a bell. Investigations by curious outsiders have found nothing. No hidden mechanisms, no speakers, no trace of the sound's origin. The bell seems to ring from the empty air itself. A vibration that begins in the heart of the village and radiates outward. For generations, locals have lived with a single, unwavering rule. When the hollow bell rings, you do not go outside. You do not open your door. You pull your curtains shut and you wait until the last reverberation has faded into the trees. The bell is not for them. The rule exists because of those who did not follow it. Over the years, there have been outsiders, skeptics drawn by the legend. They come with recording equipment and determination. They wait for midnight in their boats, anchored just offshore, or they stand on the old wooden dock. When the bell tolls, they feel a powerful, almost magnetic pull to find its source. They follow the sound. They never return. Search parties find their boats the next morning. The vessels drift calmly on the placid lake, often in the deepest part of the water near the village shore. Personal belongings, cameras, and jackets are found neatly stowed. There is no sign of a struggle, no evidence of a sudden storm or a mishap. It is as if the occupants simply stopped what they were doing, stepped over the side, and vanished into the dark. The lake bottom has been dragged and scanned. The woods have been combed. No bodies are ever recovered. The only clue is the bell, which continues to ring each midnight. A lure with no visible bait. Some believe the village is built on a geological anomaly. A cave or a fissure that acts as a natural resonator, amplifying some distant, real bell from miles away. Yet, surveys show no such formations. Others suggest a mass psychological event. A shared hallucination triggered by the isolation and the power of suggestion. But that does not explain the physical, empty boats. Older stories, whispered but never confirmed, speak of the village's founding. They say the first settlers promised something to the lake, a tribute for safe passage and good fishing. A bell was to be cast and rung in gratitude. But the bell was never forged. The promise was broken. The lore suggests the bell now rings for itself, a spectral reminder of a debt unpaid, and it seeks to claim what was promised from those who are foolish enough to answer its call. To visit Hollow Bell Village by day is to see only peace. Sunlight filters through the pines onto deserted porches. It is quiet, almost idyllic. But as night falls, a palpable tension settles. The villagers, few as they are, retreat behind locked doors. They do not discuss the bell with strangers. They simply advise you to be gone before dark. The true horror of the place is not in a monster you can see, but in an invitation you cannot refuse. The bell is a perfect, logical sound in an illogical setting. Its very clarity is what disarms people. It sounds like guidance. It sounds like a marker. It promises an answer to a mystery. And that promise is so strong it overrides the deepest instincts of self-preservation. Standing on that dock as twilight deepens, you are faced with a choice. You can leave, carrying the unanswered question with you. Or you can wait, and listen for a sound that has called many away. The lake will remain still. The pines will stand silent. And at midnight, the clear, hollow tone will roll out, not from a tower, but from the very notion of curiosity itself. It is a sound that asks a question. And to follow it is to become the answer. The ruins of Nightwater Settlement lie where the forest reluctantly gives way to a wide, slow-moving river. The foundations of small homes and a central meeting hall are still visible, overgrown with moss and fern, their stones cool to the touch even in summer. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth and decayed leaves, and a profound stillness hangs over the place, broken only by the soft, liquid murmur of the water. But it is the river itself, especially at night, that holds the settlement's enduring and unsettling secret. When darkness is complete and the sky is dressed in stars, a curious observer will notice a discrepancy. The surface of the water, black as polished obsidian, showcases a brilliant map of constellations. Yet, upon closer inspection, these star patterns are unfamiliar. They are arranged in geometries and clusters not found on any celestial chart. Some stars burn with a faint, reddish hue not seen in the night sky, while others are arranged in straight, artificial-looking lines or perfect circles. It is a reflection of a different firmament, a sky that exists only in the deep, still water of this particular bend in the river. Historical fragments, gleaned from diaries and half-remembered local lore, speak of the people who founded Nightwater. They were not typical pioneers. They are described as reverent, isolationist, and deeply attuned to the rhythms of the river. Their rituals, according to scant accounts, were conducted at the water's edge at night, involving silent observation of the reflections and offerings of intricately carved stones. They believed the river was not a body of water, but a window, a liquid gateway to another, mirrored reality that held the true shape of the cosmos. Today, the settlement is empty of the living, but it is not silent. If one stands very still on the bank, particularly on windless nights when the water is a perfect dark mirror, the sound emerges. It is a low, rhythmic vibration felt more in the bones than heard by the ears. Rising from below the surface, it resolves into the faint, undeniable texture of chanting. There are no distinct words, only a deep, resonant drone of many voices in unison. A solemn and endless hymn sung from beneath the silt and stone. The sound seems to emanate from the riverbed itself, a sonic signature of the deep water. This auditory phenomenon produces a powerful and unsettling psychological effect on visitors. The combination of the wrong stars reflected below and the submerged chanting works on the mind with a subtle, pervasive force. A profound sense of isolation descends, coupled with a feeling of being an outsider to a ceremony that is perpetually underway. This feeling slowly transforms into a compulsion. The placid, star-filled water begins to look inviting, a place to alleviate the loneliness. A quiet, internal voice suggests that the answers to the mystery, and an end to the feeling of separation, lie just beneath that shimmering surface. The urge is not to swim, but to step in, to immerse oneself fully and join the unseen congregation below. This compulsion has been the subject of much analysis. Parapsychologists suggest the place functions as a powerful psychic reservoir. The intense devotional practices of the past having imprinted themselves on the environment. The wrong stars are a lingering visual manifestation of the settlers' unique beliefs. A kind of collective hallucination etched into the very physics of the location. The chanting could be an auditory phantom, a replay of countless rituals. Now heard only when conditions perfectly matched those of the original ceremonies. A more geological theory posits a natural, if rare, confluence of factors. The riverbed here could contain a unique mineral composition that acts as a recording medium, akin to a natural phonograph cylinder, capturing the low-frequency vibrations of past rituals which are replayed under specific atmospheric pressures. The strange reflections could be caused by a lens-like layer of perfectly pure water over a darker, denser layer, creating a prismatic effect that distorts the genuine stars into unfamiliar patterns. The urge to enter the water, then, is purely a psychological reaction to this overwhelming sensory dissonance. A brain seeking to resolve the conflict between what it sees, hears, and knows to be true. Yet, for the individual standing on the bank, theories offer little defense. The reflection is undeniably wrong. The chanting is undeniably present. And the pull is undeniably internal, feeling less like an external force and more like a realization, a decision that seems to form on its own. It is the allure of the secret, the desire to become part of the mystery rather than just its observer. To join them is to finally understand the worship, to see the true stars from the other side of the water's mirror. Nightwater Settlement remains a place of quiet, profound temptation. It does not threaten, it invites. It presents a beautiful, serene, and deeply wrong picture, accompanied by a song that promises belonging. The greatest danger is not in something reaching out from the dark water, but in the human mind's own yearning for resolution, for communion, for answers. The settlement stands as a testament to a belief so powerful it altered the very nature of a place. And the river continues to flow, holding its alien stars and its submerged hymns, waiting patiently for those who choose to accept its silent, compelling invitation. On the edge of a windswept coast, where the sea meets a forest of dark pine, there is a place where the past refuses to cool. From a distance, it appears as a collection of stone foundations, low walls, and the blackened skeletons of a few chimneys, all nestled in a bowl of land that slopes down to the water. It is a scene of quiet ruin, a village lost to history. But to spend time here is to realize the tragedy did not end. It merely changed form. The fire happened generations ago. It began in the dry mill, fanned by an offshore wind that raced through the wooden buildings with terrifying speed. The entire village was consumed in a single, roaring night. There was little to save. The survivors scattered, carrying only their grief. In time, the land was left to the elements. A stark and somber memorial. Nature has been slow to reclaim it. Grass grows in patches, thin and pale. The trees that approach the ruins are stunted and twisted, as if repelled by the memory in the soil. The first thing a visitor notices is the smell. It is not the damp, earthy scent of old stone you might expect. It is the faint, persistent odor of wood smoke. It clings to your clothes, your hair, the inside of your nostrils. It is the smell of a hearth, but one that offers no warmth. It is the smell of something recently extinguished, a scent that has seeped into the very grain of the remaining timber and the pores of the stone. No amount of sea breeze seems to disperse it. It is the signature of the place. Then comes the ash. On perfectly calm nights, when the air is still and the bay is a sheet of black glass, it begins. A fine, gray particulate drifts down from a clear sky. It collects on your shoulders, dusts the leaves of the hardy thistles that grow between the stones, and settles on the surface of stagnant puddles like a deadly frost. Scientists have taken samples. The composition is ordinary, the carbonized remains of ancient wood and vegetation. But there is no source. No active fire for miles, no industrial output upwind. It simply materializes. A gentle, silent precipitation of a night long past, replaying the final moments of the village's destruction over and over. Within the ruins themselves, another phenomenon occurs. As dusk deepens, figures seem to coalesce inside the roofless shells of the buildings. They are not full-bodied apparitions, but shadows within shadows. They are the burnt silhouettes, impressions of pure darkness that hold a human shape. One might be framed in what was once a doorway. Another seems to kneel in a corner. They do not move. They simply are, etched into the fabric of the location like afterimages from a colossal flash. If you approach, they dissolve into the ordinary darkness of the ruin. But from a distance, they return. Permanent stains of a moment of supreme heat and light. What happened at Ashroot Bay? Historical records confirm the fire, but offer no explanation for these enduring echoes. Geologists point to unique mineral deposits in the clay that might, under specific atmospheric conditions, release a fine, ashy dust. Psychologists speak of the power of suggestion, of a brain predisposed by the smell and the history to see patterns in the ruins. But local lore, sparse as it is, suggests something else. Suggests that the fire was so sudden, so all-consuming, that it did more than burn the village. It burned the event itself into the timeline of the place. The panic, the heat, the final moments, were seared into the very air, the earth, the memory of the bay. The falling ash is not a weather pattern, but a memory of the sky raining cinders. The silhouettes are not ghosts, but photographic negatives left by the intensity of the blaze, shadows permanently cast where people once stood. The smell is the simplest memory of all, the most primal sense refusing to forget. Ashroot Bay is not haunted by spirits who speak or move. It is haunted by an instant. A single, catastrophic instant that has become a permanent feature. To walk there is to walk through the aftermath of a disaster that is, in some eerie way, still ongoing. It lingers in the scent on the wind, in the gray film on your hand, in the dark shapes that watch from the hollow homes. It is a place where the past did not become history. It became environment. A quiet, persistent, and ashy reminder that some fires, once lit, never truly go out. They simply settle, and wait, and from time to time, remind the present of their enduring heat. Last Bend Village sits where the river makes its final curve before breaking into countless channels. It is the farthest settled point of the delta, a thin line of structures balanced between water and reeds. Beyond this place, maps fade into empty space, replaced by vague markings and uncertain lines. What lies past the bend is shaped by water alone. The village was founded as a waypoint for traders and fishermen who needed a final place to rest before turning back. Homes were built on raised ground, reinforced with stone and timber brought from upriver. For a time, Last Bend thrived quietly, sustained by passing boats and the steady flow of the river. The water here moves differently. Currents twist and fold, sliding past one another in slow, powerful motions. The surface rarely stays still. Reflections stretch and distort, making distance difficult to judge. Even experienced navigators describe the bend as disorienting, a place where direction loses clarity. Locals learned to respect this stretch of river. Boats were tied carefully. Travel after dusk was avoided. Stories were shared in low voices, passed from one generation to the next. They spoke of lights that appeared only once to those who saw them, glowing just above the waterline. The lights were never predictable. They did not follow seasons or storms. They appeared on calm nights as often as unsettled ones. Witnesses described them as pale and steady, drifting slowly downstream beyond the last bend. They were not bright enough to illuminate the shore, but clear enough to draw the eye. Those who followed the lights were never seen again. At first, disappearances were rare. A fisherman failed to return. A trader vanished after leaving the docks alone. Each incident could be explained away by strong currents or navigational error. The river was dangerous, and accidents were expected. Over time, a pattern emerged. Every disappearance followed a sighting. Someone would mention strange lights earlier that evening. By morning, their boat would be missing, or found drifting near the bend. No debris was ever recovered downstream. No bodies surfaced. The river kept what it took. As reports grew, travel to Last Bend slowed. Traders stopped coming. Fishing routes shifted. Some families moved inland, unwilling to remain so close to the edge of the known delta. Those who stayed were bound by history and necessity. Researchers eventually arrived, drawn by the consistency of the accounts. They charted water depth, current speed, and sediment flow. Instruments showed nothing unusual. The river behaved as expected for a delta of its size, powerful but stable. Night observations produced little. Lights did not appear on command. Weeks passed without incident. Then, without warning, a single glow emerged near the center of the channel. It moved slowly, just above the surface, silent and steady. Observers reported a powerful urge to follow. Not fear, but focus. The light seemed to promise clarity, as if it marked a path through confusion. Those who resisted described physical discomfort, tightness in the chest, a restless pull that did not fade until dawn. Locals say the river chooses. They believe the lights are not signals, but invitations. Each person who sees them is being tested. Only those who respond are taken. Why some are chosen and others spared remains unknown. Last Bend village itself bears the weight of these beliefs. Homes face away from the river. Windows are shuttered early. At sunset, the village grows quiet. Boats are secured far from the main channel. Lamps are kept low to avoid reflecting on the water. Beyond the bend, the delta spreads into a maze of channels that shift year to year. Sandbars rise and vanish. Reeds grow thick enough to hide entire waterways. Navigation becomes guesswork, guided by instinct rather than map or compass. Those who ventured past during daylight reported a strange loss of orientation. Sound seemed distant. The horizon blurred. The river split repeatedly, each branch appearing equally plausible. Turning back proved difficult, as landmarks failed to remain consistent. No one who followed the lights was ever found in these outer channels. It was as if the river did not carry them forward, but absorbed them entirely. Over the years, Last Bend village shrank. Buildings fell into disrepair. Docks collapsed and were not rebuilt. Only a handful of residents remain, maintaining what they can. They do not speak often to visitors. When they do, their words are careful. They say the river remembers every crossing. They say it knows who respects its boundaries and who does not. They say the lights appear when the river grows tired of being watched but not understood. Today, maps still end at Last Bend. Beyond it, blank space remains. Satellite images show only water and vegetation, shifting too quickly to define. Official records list the village as sparsely inhabited, economically inactive, and geographically unstable. Yet at night, when the water smooths and the wind stills, faint glows sometimes appear near the bend. They move slowly, confidently, as if guided by unseen currents. Those who see them from shore do not follow anymore. They turn away and wait for morning. Last Bend village stands as the final marker of certainty. Beyond it, the river decides what remains and what is taken. And it does not give back what it claims. Thank you for traveling with me into the haunted river delta villages of Louisiana. These places are quiet. But they are never empty. The rivers remember every life taken by flood, fire, and time. And in these villages, memory becomes something else. Something that watches. Something that waits. If you ever find yourself drifting through Louisiana waters at night, listen closely. If the river calls your name, do not answer. If you see lights where no village should be, keep moving. And if the water grows silent, turn back while you still can. Rest well tonight, my friend. And may the river never remember you.